Hi everyone, it's Franny, and today is day 3 with the Beck Spyder. So where we left off on episode 2 was I'd completely gone through both carburetors, cleaned them very well, and I put them back on the car, and I was able to see a little bit of an effect from the air bleeds on each side. So that leads me to believe that carburetors are at least close enough. But we're still seeing our hot cylinder number 2, and I don't feel the car is really running well. It will idle, but just doesn't feel good to me. So I think I should have started where I should have started, and that is to do the valves. That's going to be our next step. I should have done that first. That was bad on me, but people bring a car over and you don't know the history on it, and they say, oh, it just needs a little bit of a tune-up. Well, really should start from the ground and work your way up. So if you're looking for a complete tune-up guide on a Volkswagen Beetle engine, I'll go ahead and link that up above. It's about like an hour long, but it gives the whole process from stem to stern. So I'm not going to go through each little bitty detail on how to do the valves, but we are going to check them. We'll go ahead and go through all 4 cylinders and make sure they're all within spec. Now, if I see them all looking great, then I have another couple of tests I'm going to run on the engine to see what we can find out why that one cylinder is so much different than the others. But all right, so let's get started this morning and let's get into those valves. One of the super cool things about this clamshell is look at the valve covers, completely accessible. So we can totally get to them from the top. There's no covers over them or anything else. So that's going to make this valve adjustment super easy. I'm going to start by putting a rag underneath the valve covers here. I just don't want to drip a bunch of oil down onto these exhaust headers and down here. So that'll help keep everything nice and clean. And grab our big, huge screwdriver and pry this valve cover off. Okay, we can work our valve cover off and see what we've got here. There we go. I don't see anything too crazy here. Intakes are on the inside, exhausts on the outside. So next step is going to be to rotate the engine to top dead center cylinder number 1. This is cylinder number 1. So we will do number 1 first, and then we're going to rotate 180 degrees backwards and do number 2. Okay, well, our rotor is pretty close to the notch on the distributor. I double checked that that is indeed cylinder number 1 going out spark plug wire wise. And we've got a little slot there on the pulley. And that little nick there, I'm going to line up with the brake in the case and assume that that is top dead center actually. A lot of times these little notches on the distributors are a little bit off, and they can be different in different places because of how it's timed or how far advanced it is. So we're going to go by this notch down here on the flywheel. Looks like we're at top dead center. We can start adjusting cylinder number 1. I'm going to adjust both the exhaust and the intake to 0.006. That's what I feel is kind of the best setup for these sorts of things. I don't know if this engine's completely different or not, but 0.006 is a good place to start. So let's check our valves. These should both be, you can hear it kind of move a little bit. So I know it is definitely off the valve. You know, slightest click, right? Okay. So let's check this. Oh my gosh, that's so tight I can't even get this in at all. Wow. Okay, yeah, so that's way too tight. Since that valve is so tight, both of them, the intake and the exhaust, I'm kind of curious as to what they're actually set to. So I've got some smaller feeler gauges here, a 0.004 and a 5, and let's see if we can figure out what they're actually set to. So this is a 0.004, and I can't even get that through. Holy cow. Oh, okay, so that one went through there, and this one is so tight. This is the exhaust, by the way, and it should be looser than the intake. I can't even get that in there. Okay, well, that's crazy. So the valves are just way too tight. So I'm going to go ahead and loosen them up and set these to 0.006. So I just got done talking about the valve clearances at 0.006, which is normal for a regular Beetle, but I didn't find any of the valves anywhere close. So that got me to thinking, I wonder if I'm really on the right track or not. So I did some research, and I believe these engines were actually built back in the day with chromoly push rods. So those are steel push rods. And the idea is that the engine actually expands quite a bit, much more than the push rods do. So that means that you actually set them cold to 0 clearance. And that would explain why all the valves felt like they were really tight. So you just reach underneath there, grab that push rod and spin it. And if it'll spin, then you're good. So that leaves all the valves at 0.006, which means I need to go in and reset them all to 0 clearance again. But I found something in the engine that makes all this a moot point. So I'll get to that in a bit. All right, great. So with that done, let's give it a try again. I think maybe we'll have better luck this time. If we don't, then I'll move on to some more diagnostics. But let's give this a try. I'm kind of excited about this. I'm really hoping this is going to be awesome. Okay, here we go. Wow. Well, now I'm kind of a little bit lost. So the valves were terrible. I fixed that. The carburetors didn't seem like they were happy, so I cleaned them. But the car is still running the same way. So what I just did just a second ago was just to lightly push on the gas. So the thing should just lightly accelerate, no crazy pumping or anything, just sort of lightly push on the gas and get it going. And it just stalled. I mean, how could that, why would it stall on all 4 cylinders? That just seems so strange to me. Remember, I was kind of complaining about this fuel line setup here, that it looked a little dodgy to me. There's the fuel filter there. And it was sitting down on top of that exhaust horn down there and just sort of sitting on it. That just drives me crazy. And it was really, really hot. So as a temporary thing, I pulled it up and just sort of attached it up here to just get it up and out of the way. I had a sneaky suspicion that maybe it was just getting too hot and we're just starting to pull vapor through there. I don't know. Can't really be certain, but I think the engine is actually running for a change. The engine seems to be running a little bit better now, which is kind of interesting. I am still fuzzy on exactly what's causing it. I find it hard to believe that it was just that fuel line, but maybe, I don't know, maybe it's just running really, really lean. I did run the air bleeds out a little bit, which would have made it run a little leaner. So, I don't know, I'm totally confused by this so far. But at any rate, at this point, since it's actually running and idling a bit, I thought I'd go ahead and throw the airflow meter on each of the carburetors and see if they're anywhere near synced. So let's go ahead and try that. I just trying to, hit this from all angles and try to dial it in. I think we've got a couple of things masking other things. So let's go ahead and get the flow meter on these things and see what we see. So before I start the engine with all that clatter and everything, I thought I'd kind of talk you through this a little bit. This is called a unisync, and you set it on top of the carburetor, and the carburetor, of course, is pulling air down. There's a little hole in the bottom of this thing that goes all the way up to the top, and so it will draw air through this tube and raise this little red plug here, and it'll sit there and bounce around up in here, and you can give you an idea of the relative pull on each one of the cylinders with this thing. So they're really, really handy for dialing in each one of the cylinders. So these carburetors have an independent air adjustment on each side for each barrel. And when you're testing this and you see if the barrels are off left and right, as opposed to this carburetor versus that carburetor, then you can adjust them down here. Now when I took the carburetor completely apart, both of those things were run all the way in. And the dellorto manual says you probably shouldn't have to mess with them, and they just leave them where they are, but they add them just there so that you can really tightly dial in the two barrels together. So I want to see how close these things are. So if we're drastically different side to side, that's the idle adjustment at idle. And if we're drastically different at higher speeds, then it's the throttle linkage that's different. So we're going to go through all of that. This is a bit of a process and very iterative, back and forth and everything, and we might need to adjust our throttle linkages and all sorts of stuff, but I think I'm going to give that a try now. I might have to redo all of this if I find something else that's pretty obvious, but I don't know, maybe it seems to be running, which is kind of strange. So this thing just confuses the corn fritters out of me, but let's go ahead and see if we can dial this in. And if we can get it to run well, idle well, accelerate well, then that's pretty much where we want to be anyways. So, okay, let me give this a try. Let's see where we are. Well, those two are pretty similar. That's great. That's what we're looking for side to side. Let's check the other side. They seem pretty similar side to side. That one's a little bit higher. This one a little bit lower. There we go. Raise that guy up just a smidge. All right. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now we'll go back and check the other side again. Our idle is just too high. It looks like it's about 1200 or something. So if we're dropping the idle, I'm just going to be going back and forth on each side, just trying to dial this in, get them the same, and get that idle down to about 800-900 RPM, something like that. Well, that's the two of them synced up. That actually sounds pretty good. I've got the two synced up. Sounds like it's actually running properly now. It might be ready for a test drive. The idle is a little high. It's about 1,000. I'll leave it there for now. I might slow it down later, but the engine sounds nice and solid, doesn't it? Sounds a lot better. Well, let me go ahead and put the air cleaners back on the car, and it might just be ready for a little tootle. So let's go ahead and do that. It only takes a second, and maybe we're ready to take the car out for its first drive. So at this point, the car will idle, and I was thinking that it was ready to drive. It sounded pretty good, actually. You can hear it, it's sort of idling away at least. But it's the mid-throttle response that's terrible. So check this out. Right now we're at about just below 1,000 RPM. If I try to climb up past 1,500 to 2,000, it just falters. See that? And it wants to die every time. That's 2,000. So here's what I'll do. I'll hold it, I'll get it up to 2,000 and hold it, but I won't change the accelerator pedal. Watch this. Okay, there we go, holding. It just falters. See what I mean? So after all that, it's still not right. So I think what I want to do is go in a little bit deeper. I have something I want to use to test it. I'll show you that. What I've been alluding to is I have a compression tester and a leak down tester. So I'm going to let the engine cool down a little bit because it's kind of hot. I still don't feel confident taking this thing out on the road. I really don't. I mean, it'll probably work and I could probably restart it and probably this and that, but it's going to be terrible and it's not going to be any fun. So let me let the engine cool down a little bit. I just don't want to pull the spark plugs out when the engine's good and hot like this. It's really bad to pull the plugs out. So the engine should probably be a little bit warm if you're doing compression tests and leak down tests, but I just don't want to destroy the spark plugs or the heads in the process. So really the steps are that we put the engine at top dead center, cylinder number 1. That's easy enough to do. We've done that for the valves, and so that's straightforward. Next, we'll just pull out our spark plug and get that out, and then we're going to insert our tool and perform our leak down, and then we'll just kind of move through the rest of the engine and test each cylinder. A little bit easier way to get these things in, because sometimes they just don't go in very well and it's a little hard to turn, is to use a little bit of silicone paste. It also helped the washer here, the little rubber gasket guy, seal better. So you can just put a teeny bit on the threads, just makes it go in a little easier. Now we're all set here. Let's go ahead and set up our gauge and we'll get to testing this cylinder. All right, the way our tester works is we want to set this regulator on here all the way open. So just counterclockwise. It's already kind of there, and if you're having trouble moving these, you can push them to lock them and then they won't move. So you want to make sure you pull it out first. There we go. And you just want to open it all the way. All right, with that open all the way, the next step is to hook up our air here. There we go. Now with our air line in, before we run up our regulator, we're going to be plugging in the line that we screwed into the cylinder. So that goes in here. So we've got our line in from our compressor, and I've got about 90 psi there. And this is the line going into the cylinder. I think I'm going to try testing somewhere around 75 psi on the input, and we'll see what we have on our output. All right, so we just crank our regulator up here. Here's our needle coming up. So far so good, huh? Looks pretty good. Here's 70. And there's 75 psi. And our other gauge is showing about 75 psi as well. So I would say cylinder number 1 has excellent leak down. There's almost none at all. You can always sort of smell a little bit and maybe look for a little bit of hissing, but I can hear the slightest bit. But of course, that's true. You're never going to have a perfectly airtight seal in there. But that's excellent, actually. Excellent numbers. All right. Well, with number 1 looking great, let's go ahead and move on to number 2. All right, here we go. I can hear a little bit of hissing. Yeah, a little bit more. So we can see that we've got our input set to 75 and our output looks like it's about 73. So that's still really good. That's a teeny weeny little leak down actually. I can hear it a little bit. It's the intake valve. I can hear it just sort of making a little bit of noise through the carburetor. It's not too bad, but I can hear a slight bit of hissing. So we'll just mark that down in our notes. Cylinder number 1 was excellent. Cylinder number 2 has the slightest leak. It's just a few percent, so it's really not bad at all. And we're going to move to the other side and see where we are with 3 and 4. We're all set up on the right side of the car. Cylinder number 3 is at top dead center. So let's go ahead and crank this up to 75 psi and see where we are. Oh boy, you can hear noise. Hear it? Oh my gosh, look at that. That's pretty different. All right, we'll get up to 75 here. And at 75, whoa, 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 did you see that? Let's back that up. All right, so there it is. It's climbing up like that, but then the needle jumps forward, almost 15 psi. That's huge. I even felt the car shake a little bit as it did it. So I'm thinking we've got a problem with the intake valve because I'm hearing the noise through the carburetor. Well, that's very curious. Let's move on to cylinder number 4 and see what that looks like. All right, now we're all set for top dead center cylinder number 4, and we've got our hose in, got everything all connected. So let's go ahead and crank this up and see what it says. Oh my gosh, listen to that. Quite a bit of hissing. All right, there's 75, and it's a little bit below 70, but boy, listen to this. Yeah, that's quite a bit. So we're at 68, it looks like, on a 75 input. All right, so 75 PSI on our input, and 68 or so on our output is about 9%. And you can hear it, it's just making a huge fuss back here. So the problem with this is not the actual numbers, but the incredible difference, the 1, 3, 7, and 9. Obviously the head on the right side is leaking quite a bit, and it's at least coming out of the intake valves. Funny, but that's what they're doing. So the intake valves evidently aren't sealing nearly as well on this side as they are on the other side. Well, that's certainly an issue. It would really explain the difference between the left and the right and that big loby sound that we keep hearing, that sort of rumbly, loby sound. So I guess I'm gonna have to get with the owner of the car and see what he wants to do about this. But I'm thinking this head is probably gonna have to come off the car. Hopefully we can take it off in the car. We'll have to see if there's enough clearance. I'll have to measure and everything and see what's going on. But okay, so that's where I'm gonna end it for today. That we've found a bit of a smoking gun. It's not super terrible, but it's enough to cause a real problem. You'll have to stay tuned and see how it all turns out. So thank you so much for watching. If you got any questions or comments, go ahead and leave them down below and I'll get right to them. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. So thank you again so much, and until next time, safe travels. Bye.